Well, thank you so much for coming. Uh, I'm Tom Martin. I'll be your host today. I am the CEO and founder of LawDroid, and I'm presenting part 5. So this is the home stretch of generative AI for lawyers, empowering solos and small law firms. And so I'm very excited to be close to being done because it's been a long journey, and you probably have seen that I've rescheduled these a couple of times. So thank you so much for coming to the final part of generative AI for lawyers. So with that, part 5 today is about the future of AI in law and continuous learning. So kind of putting everything together, what are we going to use this stuff for? What can it do? And how are we going to stay up to date with everything? Because as you know, it's like a fire hose every single day, brand new information coming through. And keeping up to date with everything is a bit like trying to tread water with a tidal wave. But let's take a look. Oh, just to plug LawDroid Manifesto, definitely check it out. If you haven't subscribed, please consider it. I'm going to talk about it later too, but just want to get a plug in there. So we're going to talk about emerging trends. Where does it fit? Like, where do these AI innovations fit into your practice? Continuous learning, networking, and community building, and finally, staying updated. So let's talk about emerging trends. This is where AI is starting to hit the road and actually make some progress. So for natural language processing, which includes generative AI, there's a few different ways that it could help. Enhanced legal research. We've seen that out the gate with Harvey, with case text and co-counsel, getting acquired by Thomson Reuters, now having that great, rich resource. VLEX, with their international collection of legal information. All three of them, and LawDroid as well, have AI legal assistants that do legal research. And so that legal research function, especially when you combine generative AI with a trusted source of information, as we talked about in a prior episode, really makes it an offering that is ready for prime time. It's not prone to hallucination, although, as we'll talk about later, retrieval augmented generation is really, really good, but it's not perfect. It is still necessary for lawyers to review the work product before they file it, just as they always have been responsible for that. So you can't forget that part. Document drafting is another application. There's a great startup, Troy Doucette, who I've been to actually a couple of conferences with, and he's a really great guy. It's AI.law. And the drafting that he does, I mean, we do some drafting. There's other companies that do drafting, but he has it really dialed into litigation lawyers' needs. And so AI.law, if you check that out, basically you can feed in your interrogatory requests from opposing counsel, and then feed in the facts that you're aware of for your client, and it would actually like draft up discovery responses. And I think he also has a function where you can put in a complaint and it'll draft an answer using generative AI. So that's pretty cool. Document analysis is also a strength we've identified, right, from everything that AI can do. It's not just about generating information, but it's also about analysis and extracting information. So one example that we have with LawDroid actually is where you could feed in a motion from the opposing counsel, and it would read through it and extract the arguments so that you don't have to read the whole thing. Saves a lot of time that way, and gives you the facts as well as the legal support for the position of the opposing counsel. Case analysis, kind of the same thing. And we also have this function within LawDroid where you can pull up a case and then you can brief it. So it analyzes it and breaks it down into facts, issues, holding, procedural history, and reasoning about how it got to where it got. Also, one other thing that you can do is you could ask a follow-up question of a case. And by the way, this isn't just LogDroid, obviously. This is, CoCounsel, Harvey, Paxton AI can also do this. But when you ask a follow-up question, one experiment that I ran with a customer, this was the day before yesterday. I did the search, I found a case, and then I asked a follow-up question where I said, my client's facts are like this. Can you apply this, standard in this case to these facts and let me know whether or not you would find liability? So like, and it actually gave a reasoned response that was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't as detailed as we would do ourselves, but it gave a couple of paragraphs that analyzed correctly the standard and how to apply it. Not bad. And so this, just so you can see, this is what Copilot looks like. And you have all of these built-in functions, but the case analysis here allows you to do some of those different research functions. And then up here on the left-hand side, you see where it says documents. It's actually a separate screen where you can upload your documents and analyze them, extract arguments. And we even have the ability for you to press a button and create counter arguments. So that motion I was talking about, it extracts the arguments. You could read it quickly, and then with the press of one button, create counter arguments. Now they're counter arguments based upon the facts and persuasive argument, but they do not include cases to support the position of those counter arguments. We are working on that, but we haven't incorporated it yet. And maybe it's actually a good thing because it still requires the lawyer to be actively involved in finding that case precedent, which they can through our research function, and then putting that into their brief. Predictive analytics is another strength that AI we're finding out has in terms of one application of these chatbots, which you don't necessarily think of immediately, but the role-playing aspect, where in terms of minimizing the risk that you go into when you go to argue a motion in front of a judge, you want to look at different points of view. So you could assign characteristics to an AI chatbot, and we've actually done this with LogDroid, where you can outline the personality, which you could describe of a judge you're familiar with, as well as the kinds of cases that they have ruled on and how they ruled on them, and upload your motion, upload the motion of opposing counsel, and then have the judge give you feedback in a Socratic loop where it's the judge is asking you questions about your position. Likewise, you could assign a role for a devil's advocate, which is your opposing counsel, for the same material, the same motions back and forth, and then make those arguments to opposing counsel, and identify possibly themes or legal issues that you weren't emphasizing before, and that you would want to buttress with additional arguments, additional case citations. So this role-playing thing is actually very powerful because it helps you to expand the scope of how you're thinking about your case. Jury analysis is another example of the same kind of idea, where you can feed in the information that you're aware of a particular juror, their socioeconomic, demographic information, their education, their information that you might have about the kind of work that they do and how they've responded so far within the context of the trial. Like maybe for voir dire, they answered a number of questions. How did they answer those questions? And then feed that into building a chatbot that essentially represents that juror, and one for each, and then having them give different feedback about the case and what they think about it. It's a pretty amazing thing, because it really helps to cut the risk of not knowing how different personality types would respond to the material, to the trial narrative. And then you can work that into perfecting your argument. Now, I'm not saying at all that these would be perfect representations of these actual human beings and that it would precisely answer the way that they would. I'm not saying that. And none of these tools can do that. But it provides a facsimile that helps you to think outside the box of what you normally would. Because I think when we normally approach trial preparation, and I have, there's so much going on, and you kind of get a very narrow focus on your story and the strengths of it. Because as advocates, we want to push the strengths of our case. And so seeing the weaknesses that might be pointed out through this type of juror analysis or role playing is a great advantage, because if you can emphasize your weaknesses, you can do something to prepare against them. Risk assessment, kind of the same application that I mentioned when you do the case, the application of a case to a particular set of facts. You could take a particular set of facts, you could feed in an insurance policy, or you could feed in a specific area of tort law, and then ask it to determine whether or not that would be a case that there would be liability or no liability. You know, I remember when I was at UCLA Law School many years ago, you know, the question of liability, no liability was a tricky one. My professor, he liked to use spreadsheets and essentially put the data in and then find liability, no liability, and then to try to play with what the facts were that were actually triggering that outcome. And it was not a hard science for sure. These types of tools help us to better analyze the global overview of how those cases play out, and can help sometimes to identify themes that we're not thinking of. Outcome prediction. There is a legal tech company, I can't remember their name right now, but actually has judicial information about the judge's profile, how they've decided certain cases. I believe it even has a graph that shows a breakdown of their decisions on different legal motions. And given your own, you can analyze and compare your motion to previous motions that have been filed, argued, and ruled on, and then give you a prediction percentage-wise of the potential for you to win that motion. Could be very helpful in analyzing a case before you go to trial, before you go to that hearing to argue it, and even before you even take on the case. You know, it may seem like a case that is a sure win and turn out after some analysis to have some serious weaknesses with it. Virtual legal assistants. This is one area where, you know, generative AI has really come alive in terms of what it can empower us to do, especially for solos and small firms, because unlike large firms, and I say we because I launched my own practice as a solo lawyer in 2006, and it's scary. You're all by yourself. You don't have a lot of resources, if any, and you're trying to make the most of it with what you have. I was very fortunate to interview one of my, one of my virtual mentors, Carolyn Elephant, a couple days ago. And when I read her book, Solo by Choice, it was right after I read Jay Foonberg, who I don't know if any of you have heard of him, because he was quite, old school, but he had, his systems for setting up your law practice. And so Carolyn definitely updated that. And others like Stephanie Kimbrough and Richard Granite, they had some guidance about, setting up a virtual law firm back then. But there is a lot to do. And so to have the assistance of AI to do more with less is definitely really great for solos and smalls. So what are the different areas that could help you in client engagement? Client engagement, what I mean by that is, for example, Odroid, you could put a chatbot on your website. It could help to have that initial sales conversation with a website visitor, grab their interest, tell them a little bit about your firm. Do you charge for consultations? What kind of legal practice areas do you cover? And even better now with generative AI, you can feed in the entire database of web pages from that website, where lawyers have usually written a lot, either in a blog or they have FAQs. But instead of putting the burden on this person who's in jeopardy and they need help, instead of putting the burden on them to find this information through meandering through a website, they could just ask the question and get the answer. And when they get that kind of speed of an answer, it imbues them with trust and confidence in this particular lawyer because they got the information that they needed. And I don't know if how many calls you've dealt with when it comes to potential clients, but usually it's the lawyer that answers the phone first that gets the client. And so being able to answer the question first is a very powerful thing, and one thing that AI now enables. Repetitive tasks. It's possible to use virtual legal assistants to help you with those things, such as helping to draft an email that is fairly like knockoff standard email, not one with analysis necessarily, but even when you use Gmail, it does autocomplete, but generative AI is kind of like autocomplete on steroids. Client interviews. So you could use virtual assistants to basically send an email to a client, give them a link, they click on the link, it opens up a chatbot on their phone, looks exactly like a chat app, which, a messaging app that all of us are familiar with. They type in their answers, and then in the background, that information is getting sent to the lawyer, put into their CRM, their practice management system, so they don't have to do double entry. Just puts that in there, maybe generates documents based off those same answers, emails that to the lawyer. The lawyer gets work product that's 85% done because the forms are filled out. And so then when the lawyer has that interaction with the client, they have the benefit of all of this information. They have the document work, the work product practically done for them. And they bring to the table what's most important to the client, is that confidence, that knowledge and expertise and peace of mind that they get from that interaction. So these are all great ways that aren't replacing lawyers, but definitely empowering lawyers to use AI as a force multiplier to get more done. In the question and answers, I had mentioned that, where you can provide generative answers on the fly. One thing I'll touch on there is, the generative answers, sometimes people confuse that with the kind of answers you get from ChatGPT. And I have a whole article about this that I'll show you later. And you can read that. But basically, when you ask ChatGPT a question and it's providing an answer, it's relying on what we call parametric memory. It's the memory of what it was trained on initially, that 1.76 trillion tokens or what have you for GPT-4. And because there's gaps in that knowledge, there's gaps in that training, it is not imbued with the entire knowledge of humankind forever. It is limited, although it's a lot. And so there's necessarily gaps, and it tries to fill in those gaps when you're using ChatGPT. But if you use it within a specific domain, like the law, or even more narrow, like personal injury law within California, you can give it a set of data that it could draw upon, and then you take that data from a very trusted source. For example, Greg Siskin put together a bot that he has a relationship with AILA, the American Immigration Legal Association. And they have all of these great practice guides, which he feeds into his AI, and then it provides reliable answers, because it would be as if you had an associate quickly reading through all these practice guides. In California, we've done a similar thing with these bench guides that the Judicial Council makes available to judges to decide, let's say, a child custody matter. And they have like a 120-page bench guide that details all the procedure and different factors to consider. And the AI essentially has the benefit of that education when it answers a question about child custody. So these things have a very, very good level of accuracy and fidelity to the sources that they're using when you use vendors that have built additional safeguards, additional measures on top of it, like Lodroid, like Casetext, like Harvey and Paxton. So don't discount them. That's what I'm saying. So this is the updated website homepage for Lodroid. And this here on the right is an example of a virtual assistant that we have built in. This one, actually, I used a video generator, Synthesia, which you probably heard of, where you can make these, AI avatar videos. And this one has a video to greet you, and then it leads into, like a chain of logic, conditional logic split to answer various questions. It also incorporates some generative AI. So this is what a lot of our law firm customers have on their website, but to engage potential new clients. Okay, this is kind of fun. I'm really excited to show you this. It's an example of the emerging trends. It's an example of where AI is going. I think by now you both have heard, and already it was kind of old hat me talking about, Casetext, Harvey, that you have this AI legal assistant that helps you to do legal research, that kind of thing. The new stuff, and it's not always about the new stuff, but I'm excited about this, is AI agents. It's basically where you give the AI kind of like a new employee. You give it some training, you give it direction, you try to instill it with some confidence, and then you set it off on a task on its own, and it performs that task. So I want to show you an example of this. Now, the example is it's not within the legal, context. I wanted it to be kind of fun, so I made it within the context of an AI trying to sell a couple of tickets to Depeche Mode. So let's take a look at that. Here we go. All right. Whoa. Okay, so first off, this is the framework for Lodroid where you can create your bots. And so this bot was given the task of trying to sell Depeche Mode tickets to this person that was starting to talk to it. And, when was the last time you went to a concert? A few years ago. You'll notice that the way that this bot is responding is definitely with an over-the-top Southern lilt to it. That was part of its personality. And it's, the person is feigning ignorance about Depeche Mode, and, the AI is talking about, who they are and what kind of music and songs that they've written, and gives a couple of examples there. And this person says, I don't even remember what they look like. It's been years. And the AI intelligently understands, hey, it might be helpful to show them a picture. I want to point out, none of this is scripted. I I did not tell blow by blow what to say to the AI. It is putting this together based on facts that we gave it about what it was to do, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Now they're in the discussion of like how much these tickets are going for, 150 each. And the person's pushing back, like it's too much for me. I can only pay $100. And I thought it was interesting, like, it's saying sugar, and I kind of push back on the sugar, um, because, there's a point at which it might feel a little inappropriate. So I made that comment to the AI, and it's like, I'm sorry, if I overstepped, but just trying to do business here, trying to be friendly. Do you want the tickets? And it wanted to sell 3. I can only buy 2. And then it produces this form. Now, this isn't a real form, but it's just an idea to show you that it could take an order. You tell it 2 tickets, you put in your credit card information, and then it would confirm, all right, Jane Austen, which is the character I was playing. You're down for 2 tickets. Thank you very much. So think of this. You could have something like this working for you, talking to people. Okay, so this is how we set it up. This is the back end where you could select the type of AI you want to use. You connect it to a knowledge base, in this case, the Depeche Mode Wikipedia page, so that it would be knowledgeable about Depeche Mode. There's tools that you could assign to it here. The trigger is where you describe the context that triggers that tool use. So like showing the picture was based upon, hey, it would be relevant to show a picture here. The order form is relevant because now they want to buy tickets. This is actually what the tools look like. This is what the tool looks like for showing a picture. So it was really just the context that triggered that. Here you give the instructions to the AI, you tell it what role it's playing, you tell it the facts about the concert when it's taking place, the personality, the sales instructions, and the goal. The goal is to sell these tickets. You're a salesperson, but you're supposed to stop once they bought the tickets. So just take it easy. So that's an example of an AI agent. It's a lot. There's a lot that's possible with this kind of thing. And I encourage you to think about it. Email me any ideas you have, but there's different, obviously different use cases that would be appropriate for legal, but and also not just performing legal services, but the administrative work too within the law firm. One example I could tell you of that we actually have working in production right now is phone reception. We're actually doing this right now. My law firm, as being consistent with using what we make, we have an AI that is answering my phones, and it answers the phones. Are you a new client, existing client, or something else? It intelligently understands what the person is saying. It's not press 1, press 2, press 3. It's actually hearing what they're saying and then taking them down the right road. For example, if it was to ask them, are you a new client, existing client, or something else? And they were to answer, well, I've been working with you for 5 years now. It knows that's an existing client, sends them down that road. So it's an interesting hybrid, right? Because the going down different routes, that's conditional logic, but using the generative AI skill to like understand the intent of what the person is saying, that's generative AI, obviously. And so we have this ability to combine these two things, and it is answering phone calls. It is sending it down the right route to me or people that work with me, taking messages, transferring calls. Not too shabby. Don't need a call center anymore. Don't necessarily need that initial phone answering. You can automate it. And this is only going to get better. And bringing it back to solos and small firms, this means they can amplify, they can magnify the impact they have. Do they have to get a receptionist initially? I remember that was a big expense, having an assistant. Maybe they could put it off for a little while because they get some automation to help. So these types of tools can very much help solos and smalls to survive and succeed. So where do these things fit in? We kind of talked about the bells and whistles and like tech stuff that's kind of fun and interesting. Client experience. So that initial engagement, quick answers, right? It's all about giving the client or potential new client a good experience where they feel confident about the law firm. They want to work with this law firm. They're getting answers immediately from this law firm. But it's also service delivery. As I mentioned, you can have the AI asking questions, filling out documents, essentially doing the initial legwork on providing the service. So you can put it into service delivery for document generation, for the generative interviewing, practice management. Now, this is more of like a workflow issue, or an opportunity for the workflow where you have that initial client engagement, but then you want to do intake, you want to get answers to questions, you want to create your intake memo, but then also like keeping in touch with the client, because one of the biggest bar complaints is lack of communication from lawyers. With the help of AI, you can identify different steps within the case and provide them, like you could even have an autoresponder that sends out when they've reached a certain milestone in the case. It could send out an email with a link to the bot to walk them through what the status is of their case. How awesome is that? They don't have to be trying to call in to get a hold of you and then you're not available because you're out in court. It's a great way to narrow that communication gap, or even remove it, eliminate it entirely, so they're in the loop. And as long as you keep the information within your case updated, the chatbot would be able to, the AI would be able to answer the questions about the current status of the case. Really great. Eliminates that one-to-one limitation. New business models. So we have had endless talk about the death of the billable hour, and I'm not going to say that it's going to die this year, but obviously these kinds of tools put a lot of pressure on time, right? Because they allow us to scale. It's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship. We could have a one-to-many relationship. So we're not necessarily limited by our time anymore. And it opens up all kinds of avenues. One of the things that I was really impressed by at ABA's tech show was that if you happen to have gone to the Startup Alley, which is the big competition they have at the beginning, 15 different startups. I think 14 of them were AI, right? AI legal assistants, AI, whatever, flavor of the month. The 15th one was one whose founder is actually lives not too far from here. He is a local North Vancouver guy. Called his company called Altfee. And Altfee, what they do different is that they help lawyers to analyze the value of the cases that they work on, so that they can transition out of the billable hour to either a flat fee or some kind of value pricing. And they ended up winning, out of all of these, and they're not AI. And they ended up winning the top spot because all of these AI tools beg the question, if I'm becoming so efficient, what do I do now in this new paradigm? Like, what is this paradigm? And if it is flat fees, or if it's some kind of value pricing, how on earth do I determine what that pricing is going to be? It's a big conundrum for lawyers right now. And so AltFee is a great company I encourage you to check out. Scott Lee, by the way, is the CEO, and I actually have a podcast interview coming up with him soon. But they help to answer that question. And so the new business models are, unlocking this ability to virtualize your legal services, to have like a LegalZoom-esque type law firm where you have various different services that are virtualized, where there's chatbot interviews, there's document generation happening, and all of that value is being passed on to the client. And they're paying probably for services, and I'm not talking about full-blown services that you would charge a premium for, but for some services that probably be economically unfeasible for the lawyer to provide. For example, Patrick Pallas, who's a workers' compensation lawyer in Tacoma, Washington, that I've worked with for years. We help to virtualize providing generative AI answers to potential new clients, and also microservices is what we call them, where it helps them to prepare a letter that they may need to send to their workers' comp doctor, which that alone, no lawyer would take on. In fact, in Washington, I believe it's illegal for lawyers to break up the services they provide into smaller parts. So why let all of these people go unserved? You could create these virtualized services, these virtualized microservices that you could charge for. You're not going to be charging an arm and a leg, but it's additional money, keep the lights on, and also like create goodwill within the community and have, fall-on effects of additional people learning about your firm and getting the help that they need, probably for more premium, more difficult cases. So this is how it all fits together. Continuous learning. We have someone from Louisiana State University Law School, and learning is critically important. I think right now it is absolutely necessary, and it's something that seems like it's not going to stop in the near future, because AI is just pushing the boundaries of what we need to be aware of. So upskilling, adaptability. I've always been an advocate for having a curious mindset, that is the key right now. That is the key to success with AI in the law, is to remain open-minded, experiment with these tools, be curious, and see how they fit into the work that you do. You don't have to use them, you don't even have to use them day in, day out. You can just be putting your toe in the water, seeing what the temperature is, because these things are certainly going to change. The change so far has been astronomical within the past year and a half since ChatGPT dropped. And so understanding these fundamentals will be very useful going forward. And the upskilling, I think, when lawyers, they take on these additional skills, like, not only is it necessary from just like an ethical standpoint, because we have a duty of being competent, not only in the substance of our practice area, but to be competent in the use of technology, because it's everywhere. It affects our understanding of our client's case. Is it a strong case? Is it not a strong case? Well, technology may play into that, especially now with how it's affecting or potentially affecting evidence. If you're completely unaware and haven't been keeping up to date about all of the changes going on, Well, you might take that voice recording as God's honest truth of what actually was recorded, but as you probably heard, you can have a 15-second sample taken with one of OpenAI's new models, and they can duplicate, they can clone a voice and get it to say whatever they want. There was actually a news item that came up about this, where it's already happened, where this athletic director for a high school wanted to he did put his principal in a bad light because he had a grudge against him, and got him to say anti-Semitic and anti-minority remarks that were published. And there was a big backlash from the school because they thought their principal was this crazy racist. And he said nothing. He didn't say any of these things. How often is that going to play out in family court? So how could you not stay up to date and be competent about these technology issues? We have a duty to remain competent about these things. There's plenty of certifications and training out there to keep you up to date. Let me show you a few. Of course, LawDroid University, I'm going to plug that. And what you have available through LawDroid University, if you haven't heard, we had an AI conference in January. There was over 1,500 people or so that registered for it. All continents except Antarctica, registered to see it. It was amazing. And we had 7 sessions. We had a keynote from Jordan Furlong, and AI in the practice of law, business of law, ethics, access to justice, everything you could think of. And you could see some of the people that were faculty. All of that is available for free within LawDroid University on the lawdroid.com website. And it's really great. Transcripts, AI generated takeaways, even have a chatbot for each session that's trained against the transcript and can answer any question you have about what was taught within that session. We also have the LawDroid Manifesto podcast that is within the university. And this entire five-part series is going to go into LawDroid University and be available. So if you know of anyone that you would want to watch this material and get up to speed on all things generative AI for lawyers in solo and small firms, please direct them to LawDroid University. But there's more. There's obviously other people. Mark Williams, who's a friend at Vanderbilt Law. I actually was invited by his co-founder of the new Vanderbilt AI Law Lab, Kat Moon, who's his co-founder and a friend of mine as well, invited me to guest speak at her legal design class. And I got to see Mark again, and he was telling me about this generative AI course that he has. Like mine, it's 5 different parts. It's amazing. You get a certificate from taking his course. As well, you'll get a certificate from taking the LawDroid University course. But he has obviously different insights, a different point of view, and I highly encourage you to check that out too, because it's free. Why not? And there's also amazing other courses that I very strongly encourage you to take, because they're also free and from some of the leading sources, right? Google, with its introduction to generative AI. And forgive me, you probably have, I know the people watching this are pretty well grounded in this stuff, and you've probably already seen these, but maybe some of them you haven't. So the AWS one is really good. Andrew Ng, generative AI for everyone. He is, the OG when it comes to deep learning. So I would definitely encourage you to check that one out. This one here, this free class on EDX offered by Harvard, I'm actually taking it, and it's really great. Runs deep in what they're teaching. And also, I'll share with you that it inspired me to start learning Python. You know, um, I've been of the camp that has told lawyers, you don't need to code. You don't need to code. In fact, it's a better use of your time to use your insight from a lawyer's perspective to guide AI and to guide, you know, technology choices. And I still believe that. But for me, for my personal choice, because I run a legal tech company, and even though I do have some background in programming, it's a little older with PHP. And the programmers that work with me are, up to date. And I wanted to get more up to date. And the crossover with AI, because Python is a programming language that is so deeply ingrained within machine learning and deep learning, that it made a lot of sense. So long story short, if you've ever had an interest, I would recommend Python versus other programming languages, because Python has a great relationship to AI. And, even learning some basics, it's a lot easier now too to learn, because when I was coding a program, I hit a roadblock and I wasn't sure what the error was or why it wasn't working. And you can drop it now into ChatGPT, right? And you could ask it, why isn't this working? And it can give you feedback. So essentially, it's functioning like a teacher and giving me the insight. This is the error. Okay, I got it. Now, it's important not to become over reliant on it and just say, do this for me, do that for me. There's actually a startup that's doing that called Devin, but I actually want to learn how to do this stuff. So having it just help me incrementally when I need it is really helpful. So networking and community building, all of the stuff that we've talked about, it could get abstract. The coursework, if you're taking a virtual class like I am, disconnected. Using these tactics, these different AI tools within your own office or what have you, like disconnected. Bringing it all together and having a community to share these insights with and to talk about these things, extremely helpful. In one way, it's kind of like having accountability partners, right? Where you can be honest about your, that you don't know some things and you want to learn more, and other people know more than you do, and they could share that, or they might not know something that you know. One area that you could do that, yes, again, there's a LawDroid tie in here, but I've set up the LawDroid community, and it is like kind of like a Slack channel, but it's not Slack, where I post messages about what's going on, about the latest developments, and keep people up to date about what's going on. But there's also many different groups on LinkedIn. These are just a small sample of some that I would highly recommend. Legal Tech and Innovation is a private one, so you need to apply. Essentially, just ask them to include you, but they pretty much include anyone who's interested. Legal Innovation Technology, this one's wide open and has a lot of great interactions on it. Analytics, Data Science, AI Career. Now, I know this is a career one for people like possibly looking for work, but there's a lot of posts about the latest stuff that's happening in AI. And so it's a great way of staying up to date, even though it has a career focus. And then artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning. This one is, I think it has like over 1 million people that are part of this group. It's crazy. And lots of great discussions happening there. And of course, just LinkedIn itself without the groups. I'm sure if you've been, engaged on LinkedIn, you've seen the metamorphosis that it's undergone over the past 2-3 years. It has become such a hub of discussion and engagement about these issues that it's really fantastic. And, I highly recommend just following some of the hashtags, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, ChatGPT. There's a lot out there, too much. Of course, it would not be the same without having in-person conferences. So highly recommend the Clio Cloud Conference. I actually got to speak in 2017 about chatbots at the Clio Cloud Conference, and they have so many good speakers. It's coming up in October in Austin, Texas this year. ABA Tech Show, granddaddy of tech shows, and lots of great talks about, AI, and lots of great people to talk to. Great startups, as I told you about the Startup Alley. But these are great ways to engage with people and see what their experience has been. This one here is a little different focus for solo and small lawyers, because this is the Innovations in Technology Conference from the Legal Services Corporation. Its focus is more towards access to justice, legal aid. And I attend it because a number of my clients are legal aid and state bar associations and courts. But it has such great information because I think, everyone's kind of applying it in a different way. They're trying to deliver services to people directly, and that triggers like a whole different set of concerns, issues, problems to solve, and doing it ethically and responsibly. If you haven't been, I would highly recommend it. Then LawDroid, we have our own AI conference that I had mentioned before. It was extremely well received. It was virtual though. For that reason, I created that community to try to bring people together afterwards. This will likely be virtual again next year. And then the following year, the third year, provided that we still get some great engagement, I'll have it in person. And maybe Vancouver, where I live. That would be nice to have it here. I think people might enjoy that. So definitely stay involved with the conferences, stay updated on all of the latest innovations through, Substacks like LawDroid Manifesto, have over 4,000 subscribers. And here's a selection of just a few different articles that are taken from the LawDroid Manifesto Substack. One that I just published that was really well received, people really liked it, was hallucinations. What are they? Why do they happen? How to fix them? I go in depth. I know a lot of the time we get this explanation, especially, somewhat guilty here as a vendor of giving like a very, very high level explanation. But I went a lot more in depth as to why this happens and why it's actually a natural part of the operation of LLMs. Designing AI for lawyers is where I talked a little bit about my trip to Vanderbilt in Kat's class, and some of the ideas about how AI changes our approach to design questions for legal services. Real versus fictional got really deep. I'm a philosophy major, so like I got into even some existential questions about real versus fictional, because actually one of the people that attended one of these webinars brought up the question about real versus fake, and I just got it and took it a lot more philosophical. The last one, authorship in the age of AI, like how is AI changing our approach to what it means to be an author? But here are some other amazing sources. Brainiacs from Josh Kubicki. I mean, he famously wrote for, I think it was 100 days, or was it 120 days? Just like daily, boom, 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 boom. Like every single day was a different newsletter about what was going on in AI, and there was plenty to write about. Carolyn Elephant, who I have been very fortunate to present with more than, I think, 3 times now, to jointly present with her. She has a great blog, obviously, for many, many years, My Shingle, where she is now providing information about generative AI. And I believe she's going to launch her own course where I think is going to provide a certification as well in generative AI. And her book that I mentioned before, Solo by Choice, fantastic. Jordan Furlong is one of the world's preeminent legal market analysts, and I also had him on my podcast. He has his own Substack, very critical insights and great information. Ethan Mollick, if you haven't heard of him, I don't know how that's possible. It's like every single day he has multiple posts about AI. He's a professor and he's just so knowledgeable about all things AI. Really great LinkedIn posts. And he's written a book, Co-Intelligence, which I haven't read yet because I'm working on my own called LawDroid Manifesto. So I don't really want it to influence what I'm going to write about it within the legal context. But I've heard great things about it and encourage you to read that. Off the Record by Alex Sue. Alex, as you know, is a meme lord. He is very funny, but also gets across some really great lessons with his humor. Here, just to point out a couple of things on LawDroid Manifesto. Recently, I interviewed Mark Palmer, and actually just today dropped a new podcast episode with Roma Khan of Crush Contracts. So there's some pretty good content there. This is the new look of the website. Really happy with it. Work smarter with AI legal assistance. Work smarter with LawDroid. And thank you very much. This is it. I get to, like, you know, spike the ball. I'm done. Part 5. And I hope you enjoyed it. You know, send me an email, tom@lawdroid.com. Really easy to reach me, tom@lawdroid.com, or you can follow me on Twitter @lawdroid. And, definitely, if you haven't yet, subscribe to lawdroidmanifesto.com. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a great weekend. Take care.